What's your tea montage for the month? My name is Steph. This is Mr. Kitty. He's almost 20 years old and he's very grumpy and likes to monitor the neighborhood from this perch. This month I read 8 books, apparently, which feels like a lot. I felt like I read way less, but I think it's because I read a lot on audio because we moved this month to a smaller place. Starting from the top, I read The Picture of Dorian Gray again for the very first time in probably 15 years. It is way gayer than I remember. I really had so much fun reading this, but The Picture of Dorian Gray is about a young man who has his picture painted by his friend Basil. And in the beginning, he kind of tells Basil that he wishes he could be sort of young and beautiful forever while he's putting the finishing touches on that painting. Lo and behold, that is exactly what happens to him. Then we follow Dorian through his life and through these experiences where he doesn't age as he lives a very hedonistic lifestyle under the influence of Lord Henry. Throughout that whole process, his picture begins to age and take on the visible sins, I suppose, of his life. So broadly, I enjoyed this book a lot. I actually think that I got a lot more out of it this time around than in the past times that I've read this. I enjoyed the introduction / forward that the author, what's that guy's name, Oscar Wilde, wrote in, because he talks sort of about art and the purpose of art and makes these statements to almost deter the reader from reading into it too much. And then throughout the whole book there are these kind of conversations about art that take place that I found really interesting, and yeah, I think it was just exciting to me in a new way. I read that some parts of the book were censored when it first came out because of the queerness. They all want each other. They definitely do. Especially Henry and Dorian, and it's a love triangle, I'm telling you. It is, and I see that now. I don't know why I didn't see that before. So that's The Picture of Dorian Gray. After that, I listened to Blood Over Bright Haven. This is by the same author who wrote Sword of Kaigan, which I actually have not read yet, but I had it on my TBR, but my library had Blood Over Bright Haven available, so I thought, I'll start with this one. This is a fantasy, dark academia type of story, which is primarily following Siona, who is a female magician, and she wants to become a scholar of magic in this fancy institute, but women are not allowed. But they let women try out because you get selected based on these trials, just because they want to be fair and not sexist. They let women try and prove themselves poor at magic. Well, Siona isn't poor at magic. She passes, she joins this institute, becomes the first female researcher, and is really driven to overcome a lot of the stereotypes. She faces a lot of sexism. For instance, instead of giving her a real research assistant, they just assign her the janitor, and they're like, you can just teach this guy. And Siona began to strike up this friendship. Tommel actually grew up from beyond the walls that kind of keep these nomadic people out of the city-state that they're in. And so there's kind of these two ethnic groups that are really divided. Tommel's people were described like they were Irish, basically. And I think even in the audiobook, the narrator gave them a slight Irish accent, which I thought was a little bit funny. Their friendship challenges them both. And as she's doing this research, having Tommel be her assistant allows them to kind of uncover the secrets of magic and society and all of that kind of stuff. So it's very dark academia in that you're doing actual research. This book is following them doing the research, which I loved because I work in research in an academic institution. That is my day job. And so watching somebody do it, but for magic, was really fun. It's one of those stories that I haven't read Babel, but I think people who enjoy Babel might enjoy Blood Over Bright Haven, in that it's a dark academia that is written with something to say and kind of a point to be made, and is not very subtle, because this book is really interested in tearing down institutions of power and mythologies that are built up to hold that kind of power. But yeah, I think especially considering the page count, this is a standalone. She did a really good job making her points, but even though I think that would have been difficult to do for any writer, because they're huge systemic issues that are all intersectional that she's kind of playing with, and I think that it worked because she did it so through the characters' own arc and journey. Like, we get both Tamil and Siona's perspectives, but the big arc is happening in Siona. And in the very beginning, Siona has drunk the Kool-Aid 100%. It's almost shocking and obnoxious with how devoted she is to her own system and her own way of thinking and her own society. And then that kind of breaking down within her and her kind of having this experience through her relationship with Tamil and being able to see the issues in her own society is really interesting. Yeah, I think she did it in the most nuanced way she could while still clearly writing to make a point, and I enjoyed it a lot. I could definitely complain and say like, oh, there were some things I really wish that we got more information about, or that just weren't resolved that I thought would be. There's always something like that in a book, and I just thought that this was really well written, and I'm really looking forward to reading Sword of Kaigan and just any of her other books. So that is Blood over Brighthaven. After that, I read Boulder by Eva Baltazar. This was an International Booker Prize nominee, and it was originally written in Spanish, but it was translated, and I think that's my first thing that I have to say about this book is that often with translated work, I feel like something is clearly lost in the translation, and I wish that I could read this in Spanish, because reading it in English was like, she just still had such a command of words that came through really clearly, because each sentence had such rhythm and rhyme and care in how it was put together. Like, the prose, I'm saying, was very nice, very nice. Very good prose. It's pretty short. It's like 130 pages or so. And this is following a woman who is named Boulder. That is her nickname that her lover gives her. And she works as a chef on some kind of ship and eventually meets this woman. And it just details that her relationship with this woman as they settle in Reykjavik. And her wife wants to have a baby. But Boulder, she isn't really interested in having children. She really just wants to exist with her partner. I generally find it quite irritating when a writer doesn't use dialogue markers, but there is quite little dialogue in this, so I was able to kind of overlook it. I just don't know why people feel the need to be so cool, because it makes it really hard to read. Boulder's internal world has such a specific voice and sometimes kind of unexpected, and Boulder has a very like sexual way of thinking a lot of the time, or like maybe that's just where her priorities are, or how she thinks about herself like really comes through how she also looks at other people. It's an interesting point of view to be in, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, I will say it's kind of a depressing book. It's a little bit it's not happy. Got to one of the books that I wanted to read this year, Our Wives Under the Sea. I love deep sea horror. This is like something that I have a little bit of an obsession with, that I only realized was an obsession when I was reading this book. So this is about Leah and Miri, and Leah is a submariner. She actually is a biologist, and she goes into submarines and like takes samples and analyzes it and biology stuff. Then Miri is her wife. So this starts a few weeks after Leah has returned from her last trip. Something happened on the submarine. We know that immediately because Leah is not okay. She's like bleeding from her skin, and there is this rift between the women now that really hard for them to kind of overcome and to communicate with each other, because she was supposed to only be gone for 3 weeks, but she was gone for 6 months. And you slowly find out what happened from Leah's points of view, and then you see the aftermath of what happened and their struggle to communicate and connect, and how it affects Miri, who's the wife that did not go under the sea. Kind of heartbreaking and eerie. This is often talked about as a horror or like literary horror. I would say it's very much literary. Yeah, this felt way slower than I was expecting. The prose is stunning. Once again, like I could read so many different pieces of this that just, oh, you feel it. And the sections are divided up into the sections of the sea. So there's like the sunlight zone, the abyssal zone, the Haddle zone, like where it's just blackness and you're at the very bottom of the ocean. And that kind of gave it this sense of claustrophobia. Actually, I would say the whole novel feels very, very claustrophobic, because most of the time that we're from Miri's perspective, we're in their apartment and they're not even sharing the same room. They're in different rooms, and you can hear the sound of the neighbors, and she's constantly trying to call the center that her wife worked for to get information and like get help on like what happened to her, what does she need, what kind of resources do we have access to, and then you're in Leah's perspective and you're in the submarine, which just is innately claustrophobic. Yeah, that is how I would describe this, like slow, lush, claustrophobic, and loud and quiet at the same time. After that, I listened to Gothictown. This was an audiobook arc. This is one of the first books that I read that actually has the pandemic in it, kind of as a plot point. So we are following Billy. Billy gets this incredible opportunity. It's a COVID incentive to buy a house in Georgia, in this really small town in Georgia. Allows her to leave New York, and so she like uproots her whole family, which is her husband and her daughter, and they go to Georgia and move into this tiny town that feels picturesque. She opens a restaurant, she's running it, everything is lovely except for the people in the town are really weird, and there is a well on the property that is apparently open and nobody is really giving them any more information about it. This is very much for people who like cults, creepy small towns, and perspectives from mother characters. I am gonna be honest, I struggled to finish this. It was not for me, and that is like the main reason that I struggled with it. Not necessarily poorly written, although I think there were some things that should have been just cut. I think I just did not really connect to the writing style or the main character. I don't tend to connect to mother characters. I don't tend to love a cult, and I didn't really know that that was what this book was about before going in, otherwise I wouldn't have requested it because I knew it's not gonna be for me. But I can appreciate that the audiobook narration was pretty good, and I will also say that mother character, I really liked how flawed she was. She was flawed and making big mistakes and like doing things that women are not supposed to do, and you know, have happy endings at the end of. And I appreciated that. So that is Gothictown. Honestly, if you like a small town with secrets, culty vibes, Southern Gothic, mother characters, and old Victorian houses, there you go. It should be out now whenever I post this video. I read The Song Rising, remembered that I love this series so fucking much. So then I read The Mask Falling. I'm about to start The Dark Mirror. So, okay. These were rereads, but it was kind of new for me too because I read this series probably like 5 years ago before the author did a huge revamp and like big edit basically of the whole series, because she wrote the series when she was like 19 years old, wanted to make the earlier books match in terms of her style better and add like certain details or something like that. And they did a re-release with these stunning covers. God, this is a banger of a series. Hey, do you see those tiny birds? You should get those. No, no, no. Look, look. You gotta look out the window. Look out the window. No, look out the window. He's so confused. Okay, so this is an epic dystopian fantasy. Editing stuff here, I realized in watching this that I did a certifiably shit job explaining what this is about because it's a huge series. We are following Paige Mahoney. She is a clairvoyant who works in the criminal underworld because London and most of Europe is now under the control of an authoritarian regime called Scion, who actively persecute and restrict the rights of clairvoyants. It's a 7-book series, and in book 1, Paige is taken captive and discovers what the sort of true secrets are behind the whole regime, and this world just kind of breaks open. Because these are some of my favorite books that I have read as an adult, and they're so different from Priory of the Orange Tree as well, because I feel like the pacing of these is so fast. If you want politics and like slow burn romance and underground tunnels, this is like Peaky Blinders, but they use the language of flowers and they're trying to overthrow an authoritarian regime, which is amazing. From what I have noticed in my reread, I feel like there is more romance, not smut, but like emotional depth. There is like some explicit scenes in this one, I think. Yeah, I think this one has like the first explicit kind of scene. It's like yearning and emotional depth that she has injected between all of the characters as well. So I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. I've talked about this series a ton, but I know that dystopia is having a bit of a revival right now. I wonder why. And so I hope that more people will come to this series so I can talk about it with them after that. finally, the last book that I have to talk about is Great Big Beautiful Life. This is Emily Henry's newest book. Woo! And we are following Alice Scott. She is a writer who writes a lot of like memoirs, biographies, magazine articles, that kind of thing. And she is auditioning against a guy named Hayden who writes serious nonfiction, basically to write some woman's memoir. And so they're both doing interviews, but they've signed NDAs and they can't like talk to each other or anyone else about what this woman is sharing in her interview. This opportunity means a lot to Alice because her father has recently passed, and her father was like very interested in this celebrity and always wanted to interview this really old like octogenarian. The woman is 80 years old. She's sort of like Evelyn Hugo, I suppose. Now, I just reread Beach Read, and so reading this book, Great Beautiful Life, for like the first 90% of the book, which is 90% of the book, felt like it was the same ingredients, just mixed up in a different recipe. And there was a little bit less romance because you're literally getting the story of this older woman's life at the same time. And so that ended up taking up a lot more of the page time than usual, and I just felt like the characters had a little bit less connection than they typically do in an Emily Henry book, especially when I'm comparing it to Beach Read, which was almost impossible to do. Now, there was a twist at the very end of this book that made everything feel kind of different. Still the same ingredients, but it tasted different, okay? By the end, I had a different taste in my mouth and I enjoyed it. I would have enjoyed it a lot more had I not just read Beach Read. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have anything else to really say about it because I come to Emily Henry specifically for the romance. So I didn't care as much. So I think, I'm very sad to say actually, that this might be my least favorite Emily Henry book, but I liked the ending. I thought the ending was cute and interesting and, you know, left me feeling warm and fuzzy all the same. Those are the books that I read in April. Mr. Kitty has informed me that it is now time for his dinner, and he's quickly finishing the little bit of his breakfast left so I can refill the bowl. So I'm gonna do that. And thank you very much for making it to this point in the video. If you've read any of these books, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments. If you're going to read, or if you already have read these books, I want to hear from you because I need more people to talk about them with because I love it. I love it so much. And I feel like I'm the only person that I have regular contact with who has read them, and I need everybody to read them because they're so good. And you know what, I'm not gonna spoil it, but I read something about this series and how the Dark Mirror ends that just has me so excited. I'm gonna shut up and feed my little cat, probably go to the library and get the Dark Mirror. Thanks for watching. See you again in another video very soon. Bye!